CrowSong Lodge, back again with another video. I apologize that it's been a bit. I've been doing other stuff. It's a shitty apology. But I am just getting started on a new series that I actually recorded before, but I hated it, so I ended up taking it down. But I had another request recently to talk more about spreads, tarot spreads and oracle spreads, to talk about how to use them, what they're good for, and how I interpret the spreads and use them myself. And so this video is going to kind of lead into that series as well, so you can expect to see those videos coming out pretty soon. But today I wanted to talk about whether or not to use spreads and what they're good for and what they're not good for. So kind of a pro and cons of spreads. So if you've been watching my channel for a while now, then you're already familiar with the fact that I don't use spreads for my readings. And also, I just opened up my back window because it's kind of warm in here. So if you hear crazy noises from my kitten, just don't worry about it. Hopefully she'll be quiet and good. Yes, so I personally don't use spreads in my readings most of the time. And like I've said before, it's because usually when I'm doing spreads, there's a lot of cards involved that are not personally relevant to me or my client. And so I would much rather just not draw those cards and just skip over them and to get straight to the point of the information that I'm looking for. Now, I do a lot of my readings currently on what we call like the psychic hotlines. That would be sites like Keen.com or Purple Ocean or like Zodiac Psychics or that kind of thing. And so those clients in particular don't want to know any of the extra information that is available. They really want to focus on their specific question that they have and the information that they're looking for. So even though that other information is really helpful, I kind of have to like sneak it in because they don't have the patience to wait around for me to go over like 6 other cards before I get to their answer. And I feel very much the same way, especially when it comes to spreads like the Celtic Cross. There are like 4 card positions in that spread that I even care about. The rest of them, the other 6 cards, because that is a 10 card spread, the other 6 cards I don't care about, and I'm just going to skip over them when I'm reading it. So there's no point for me to even get that spread out. I might as well just pull those 4 cards and be done with it. So, but there is a lot of advantage to using spreads, and that is what I want to talk about. So we already kind of went over the cons, but I do want to talk about the pros because there is a really good reason to use spreads. Please keep in mind too that my experience for what I do now comes from the fact that I have been reading tarot for 30 years. Okay? 30. And if you think that I started as a toddler because I look amazingly young, that is true. Not quite a toddler, but I was really young. I started when I was 9 years old. So, so yes, I was 7 when I got my first deck. I started really studying when I was 9. So yes, I have a lot of experience, but the biggest thing I love about using spreads in tarot is that you learn a lot about reading tarot. I still look at spreads that people publish, and I love reading about how people use spreads, because the biggest thing I find value in using spreads is it teaches you how to approach a problem from a different angle. So one of the things that I really love, if you heard our recent podcast from We Witches 3 with Teresa Reed and Shaheen Miro about their book Tarot for Troubled Times, this one right here, I'll have to remember to flip around my video and post later. There's actually a section full of spreads in here. And what was really neat about this book is that a lot of these spreads, I have not seen the topics approached before from a tarot book. So usually if these topics come up, you're kind of just winging it to begin with. So what I especially loved, and you hear me talk about this in the podcast, is there is a spread for moving on. And this spread is built around moving on from a relationship that doesn't work for you anymore. And this could be a romantic relationship, a friendship, a family relationship, a work relationship, like any kind of relationship is fine. And let me just like show it to you here. And there should be like a picture up here of me using this spread. I laid out the cards. There are 4 cards in this spread. The first card is, why am I missing this relationship? The second card is, why am I holding on to this relationship? The third card is, what do I need to see that I'm not at this time? And the fourth card is, what is my next step to let go and move on? So if you look at that spread, you can kind of see how Teresa and Shaheen thought about, through their experiences of helping people over their decades and decades of experience combined, how they have worked with people to move on from relationships that no longer served them or were simply no longer available to them. Their experience in helping people let go of those relationships. So those questions, you know, why am I still holding on to the relationship? What am I missing about it? Those are essential things to ask yourself, and essential to identify in order to be able to let go of a relationship that is no longer available or that you should no longer have in your life. And maybe that's not something you ever considered. You just think, dang, I miss that person, or dang, I miss that situation. So using spreads and reading about spreads and analyzing spreads really helps you learn how to approach situations in a new way. It helps you learn how to analyze situations from a new perspective. It helps you kind of problem solve and work your way through situations through other people's experiences and through those people's perspectives that wouldn't otherwise be available to you without actually living inside their heads. And that is the biggest thing of all to me when it comes to spreads. So even though I may not use spreads myself in tarot now, I have absolutely learned how, when I go to draw a card, I have learned how to phrase my questions because of the spreads that I have used in the past and experimented with. I have learned the steps that I need to solve my problems and the steps that I know my clients need to get through whatever situation they're in as well. So even though I'm not using a published, official, standardized spread or something, I still have those steps and perspectives in my mind to go to when I'm faced with a situation or if somebody else is asking about a situation. So for instance, I'm going to put another picture here for you. But I mentioned before that the Celtic Cross is like my least favorite spread on the planet. There's a hatred, there's a 10-card version, and there's an expanded 14-card version. This version is a 10-card version, and it's bad enough to begin with. Can you imagine this thing with 4 more cards? Again, there's like 4 cards that I care about in this, and the most important card I care about is number 10. The outcome of the situation, the expected outcome, right? Most of the time when you're going to the Celtic Cross, you already know what happened in the past. You already knew what your expectations were. You already knew what you were hoping for. But you don't know what's going to happen, and that's the question you have. So I know a lot of times when I'm approaching a situation in my own tarot readings, my priority, what I'm looking to get out of this, is I want to know what's going to happen. Okay? But I have learned from other spreads that another super important question to me is, how can I change it if I don't like it? So if I pull that card in position 10, the outcome of the situation, and it comes up the 10 of Swords, like, no, I don't want that. I know my next card is going to be, how can I change the 10 of cards to something better? So that's another question that I learned from doing various other spreads. The how do I change this outcome card. And you learn those kind of question and answer situations by going over different spreads. Another spread that I really like that I'm going to pop up here for you is the Wounded Healer Self-Care spread. I'll put up the little infographic there so you can see who did it. It's one that I found on Pinterest and I think it's really cute. We're going to go over it in detail too in this review series that I'm doing, but just the series of questions that are asked is super, super helpful. I love that the purpose of the spread is to stop us from spiritual bypassing ourselves. And for those of you who aren't familiar, spiritual bypassing is when we sort of gaslight ourselves or diminish our own feelings. We're like, oh, I'm having a feeling right now, or I'm experiencing a thing, but the problem is that I just don't meditate enough, and if I meditated more, I would be okay with the situation. Okay, it's when we use our spirituality to diminish the validity of our own experiences, and that's a bad thing. We have feelings for reasons, and we need to be aware of those reasons and address those reasons. Trying to use our spiritual practices to make ourselves accept a situation that is not acceptable is spiritual bypassing, and is really bad for us. So the purpose of the spread is to find out what the situations are that cause us to fall into this erroneous thinking and solve those wounds that cause that behavior, and we'll identify them and then heal them. So I love that kind of breakdown. Like, why am I spiritual bypassing myself? What caused me to do this in the first place? How can I heal it? And unfortunately, it follows that up with something that I feel is a little bit unhealthy, but might be more motivating for other people, which is if I heal this, how will it benefit other people? And the reason I have a problem with that is because I don't think that we should be justifying our self-healing and our self-care based on the idea that it's going to help other people. We need to recognize that we deserve that healing because we're people too, and that makes us worthy. So other than that, I really love this spread. But I get that, some of us aren't really in that place where we can value ourselves that way. And so the only way we can really get ourselves to do that self-healing is to justify that it's for other people. So take that for what you will. And if you want to omit the last card, go right ahead. No one's gonna be the spread police and make you use all the cards. So yes, so I absolutely feel that using spreads is super important. Now, in my practice as well, I feel that it's really, really important that when you pull a card, you know the purpose for that card. And let me tell you why. Now, when I moved from Arizona to California, I donated a ton of metaphysical and magical books to my local New Age store. The ones that I wasn't using, but this one in particular I kept because one, it was my mother's and she loved it, and two, I hate it. But it's the Pictorial Key to the Tarot by A.E. White. That's Arthur Edward Waite. And yes, that is the Waite from the Rider-Waite Tarot deck. That Waite, yeah. So he wrote this book, and it was the most popular book that people used to learn tarot cards when I was growing up, and that my mother learned to use as well. Super popular, right? So, but if you look at the card meanings, I'm looking at the Seven of Cups here, and it says, divinatory meanings, fairy favors, images of reflection, sentiment, imagination, things seen in the glass of contemplation, some attainment in these degrees, but nothing permanent or substantial is suggested. And if you think about that, without any context, that means nothing. Like, if I'm just going to draw a card and be like, I'm going to draw a card, Seven of Cups. So this could be fairy favors, images of reflection, maybe some sentiment, I guess. Could be having some imagination happen right now. Things seen in the glass of contemplation. Whatever that's about. Some attainment in these degrees, but nothing is permanent or substantial. So, without context, these meanings are so difficult. And like I said, I've been reading tarot for 30 years. The Seven of Cups is not a hard card for me to read. It comes up in my readings all the time. But the thing that makes tarot easier to read is context. If I know the situation I'm reading on, if I know what I'm reading about, it is so much easier to read the cards. And having positions, assigned positions in a spread, like this card is about your mental hangups. That makes the card so much easier. Because if I pull the Seven of Cups in a position that is about my mental hangups, it probably can be interpreted as I see a lot of great things, but I'm convinced none of them are permanent. Or I get fixated on things that are definitely not permanent. So that context is going to help me with my interpretation a lot. And so otherwise, like, it is very, very broad, and you're gonna have to really, really just like follow that intuition so hard. And I guess like this is a way for people to lean on that whole like, I'm not psychic, I'm just a card reader thing, which is a whole other video. But respect to you guys because you do great card reading, but I'm gonna declare right now that you're psychic. But anyways, the spreads that you use to read tarot or the questions you ask before drawing a card, they give you context to interpret those cards in. And yes, you can absolutely do a fantastic reading without a spread, without a question, without context, but you're making a lot more work for yourself. And sometimes doing that extra work can be extremely fulfilling and really, really challenging and kind of a fun ride and a really great experience. And there are people out there who absolutely rock at it. But I don't see why we should work harder than we have to. And that's like really my viewpoint on it. Why would you work harder than you need to? So for that purpose, I really do recommend spreads because they give you context for what you're reading on. They tell you what this card is going to be about and how you're going to want to interpret that card, like the context you're going to interpret it in, what the purpose of that card showing up is. And it's also going to help you break down a situation into the different ways to address it. These are the components of the situation and how I'm going to address it in order to make real decisions in my life so that I can have the most optimal outcome that I can think of. This is how I'm going to get what I want from the situation in the best way possible for myself. And this is how other people have learned to break down the situation in a similar way. And so for that purpose, I think spreads are really, really awesome, even though I don't personally use them in my readings. So again, we're going to have a series. I'm going to take a bunch of different spreads that are out there on the internet, and I hope people don't mind, but I'm going to take your spreads and we're going to talk about how to interpret them, which means I'm going to be, actually doing that spread. I'm going to show it to you on the camera. We're going to talk about the different positions in the spread, how I'm interpreting that spread in the context of the situation, how I would modify that situation, how I would modify that spread, and the cards that I especially found valuable. So that's what we're going to be working on next on this channel as far as tarot is concerned and what we can look forward to. And this is how I feel about whether or not you should use spreads, when you should use spreads, what spreads are good for, and kind of why I don't use them now. So I hope that this helps, especially because I know there's a lot of like weird stuff about tarot spreads and oracle spreads on the internet. And yeah, everything that I said about using tarot and spreads here absolutely applies to oracle cards too. So there's a lot of oracle spreads out there, spreads that have been published for oracle decks or just for oracle cards that I absolutely use my tarot cards with instead, and vice versa. So for me, spreads are totally interchangeable and I don't see any reason why they wouldn't be. So yes, that's kind of our foundation for using spreads and how we're going to approach them. I hope that you found this video helpful, and if you did, please like and subscribe, and remember, you can always find more articles and purchase readings for yourself on my website at www.CrowSongLive.com, and I just launched a podcast, so you should check the description down below for links to that. I'll talk to you later.